Well, hello, students. Welcome to lecture number 3 from Market-Based Management. Today we're going to be talking about actually a pretty controversial topic, believe it or not, around the notion of scoping market opportunity. I can tell you from personal experience that defining market potential and defining market opportunity, in theory, sounds simple enough. However, I can tell you, working 20 years in a Fortune 500 company, that for better or worse, it becomes a bit political because when market opportunity is defined, then once that definition has been set, then all executive targets get pegged at that. And so as a result, what often happens is that your definition of market opportunity comes under heavy scrutiny. Because the fear, if you're an executive, is that you are going to be held responsible for delivering a number to the business that may or may not be attainable. And so I wanted to throw that in up front just so that you could have that as a bit of context. Now, if we look here to the left, what we can see is an example of in the PC market. Now, granted, this is, 13 years old, so a little bit old. But the idea is that, for example, in PCs, you could look at market demand, okay? And that can be sort of in the classic case that we think about in economics, where we say, well, there's a particular defined demand curve for personal computers, and then we're going to measure our share. Let's say, for example, if we're Dell Computers, we're going to measure our share versus overall market demand. Now, you can imagine that if the definition of market opportunity or market potential is equal to market demand, and I'm an executive that can get a bonus based upon numerical performance, I would prefer this market demand number over the market potential number. So you can see that there is quite a difference, or there can be, between our share of a particular company and the demand for that industry or that category versus what the potential can be. Now, one of the things that you'll want to kind of hearken back to, if you have an undergraduate degree in business, you probably, in your principles of marketing class, learned about a scholar named Ted Levitt, and he is famous for developing many seminal academic journal articles, 2 of which you probably have some familiarity with. One is the article Marketing Myopia. The other one that I'm thinking about is Exploit the Product Life Cycle. And so both of those articles were critical to the discipline of marketing, so that marketing would have more of a seat at the table from an executive standpoint, and really having the ability to speak into a business or an organization's strategy process. You can see this quote here at the bottom by Jack Welch, former CEO of General Electric, often held up as the best CEO ever. I suppose that is debatable. I think he was terrific from a CEO standpoint. This quote from him: "A narrow market definition limits your business opportunities. You have to see more to sell more." So that's sort of a synopsis of what Levitt talked about in Marketing Myopia. So I would encourage you, I believe I posted both of those articles in Discovery, Levitt's articles, so that you could have those and read those for context if you've not read them. And if you have, it'll be a good refresher of what Levitt was talking about there. So we're going to be talking, of course, in this lecture about defining market space and estimating market potential. Okay. Now here is an example of here in the non-alcoholic beverage market. So you can see here in the 40s, relatively lower market demand, made up of really kind of four different categories: soft drinks, coffee and tea, milk, and Kool-Aid. And then you can see that as we move forward in time over, the intervening 60 years, that we've got lots more different offerings, and we can also see growth in each one of these subcategories. So what we would say here in this case is certainly that would be driven by several factors, not the least of which would be the growth in advertising, right? TV, print advertising, and then certainly since the 2000s, web-based advertising. Also, we can imagine that the distribution network, the channels of distribution, have expanded tremendously as well. And so both of those aspects of marketing, both the advertising part and the logistics, channel distribution, would have to have evolved in order for this ramp in demand to go from 40s all the way up to the 21st century. Now, we can see here the way that we might define market demand, market share, and then in the case of Coca-Cola here, we're looking at what is the market share of Coca-Cola in the US, worldwide, and then among not just the soft drink category, but including not all non-alcoholic beverages. It's kind of remarkable that while at least in 2009, Coca-Cola had about half of the market share in the US, about 1/5 in the world in soft drinks, and then non-alcoholic beverages only 4%. That's pretty amazing to me. I actually would have thought that it would have been much higher. Now, look at Red Bull. Okay, same time frame. Red Bull is still sort of a new product to me, but probably for people that are a lot younger than me, it's not a new product. Same kind of analytic process. So among energy drinks, Red Bull in 2009 was about 50%. Worldwide, among energy drinks, 40, almost 42, and then non-alcoholic beverages worldwide, not even 1%. So again, to kind of look at, a narrow market definition once adopted by design is not always a limitation. So again, I would point you to Levitt's Marketing Myopia to kind of give you sort of the thought underpinnings of this chapter. All right, so switching back to personal computers, we can see market demand on the y-axis, time on the x-axis. And here the question is, what is the maximum market demand and when will it be reached? Now, I would again point you to, and actually, if you will bear with me one moment, I'm going to open up Discovery. So, wow, is he not going to let me do this? There we go. All right, so if we go into Discovery, sorry, I should have had this open before I hit record. We look at chapter 3, then what we see is that we have Levitt's 2 articles, and then we have disruption theory, which we're going to talk about here in a minute or in a few moments, and then Christensen's. Both articles are related to Clayton Christensen's disruptive innovation theory. So, why did I bring that up? So, in the case of, let's say, exploit the product life cycle article with Levitt, one of the things that you'll see is that Levitt's overall thesis is that a product has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay. And he goes into some detail on describing that. So the reason why I bring that up is that this notion of what is market potential and when will that be reached tends to be a topic of great interest, not only for product marketers, product planners, Wall Street analysts, economists, academics. And so I say all that to say there are lots of assumptions that sort of undergird this kind of curve. If you want to get into the weeds a bit, a scholar by the name of Frank Bass in 1969 published a mathematical model that has been widely recognized that provides the math that explains this kind of curve. Okay, so for those of you that want to drill to the center of the earth on this topic, I would point you to Bass's article, Frank Bass, 1969. All right, so if we are trying to, again, build sort of a mathematical model that would help us derive this notion of market potential, the way that we would do that is at the decision-making unit level, what would be the maximum number of consuming units? So, for example, here, let's think about personal computers, let's say. So let's say those are PCs for businesses, then that would be our decision-making unit or our consuming unit. So the back up here to the formula, and the definition is the maximum consuming units times the buying ceiling, the percentage that can buy at the average price, times the purchase rate. Okay, so there's we're kind of factoring this number down, right? So number of units, what's the highest percentage that units could buy, decision-making units could buy at a given price, and then what percentage of those would actually buy, and then how many would they buy, right? So you can see the unit of measure switches here from decision-making units to the product units. Okay, we switched units of measure here, and then times average price. So this formula would be a tool that you could use here, referencing Market Performance Tool 3.1. This could be a tool if at your current organization or at an organization at which you would like to work, they asked you, hey, I need you to calculate for investors that are going to be here on site in a few days. I need you to calculate our best estimate of overall market potential. And that would be a number that many executives and analysts and investors would want to know. So that's this is a kind of a neat formula to have in your toolkit. Now, we were talking about curves here in the prior slide. Well, really here and here. Now, there are several different types of what we would say innovation curves and market saturation, market potential curves. So you can see here, remember from, I guess it was algebra or calculus here, that the slope here at each one of these inflection points is goes to is that right? Goes to zero. Now I'm questioning myself. You can see that well, let me say it this way. This curve is increasing at an increasing rate. At some point it's increasing, but the rate of increase is flat. And here, the rate of increase is increasing, but at a decreasing rate. And so you see sort of this oscillation back and forth. Now, the reason why that's important is that there's quite a bit of study that's been written about the difference between continuous innovation and disruptive innovation. Sort of a cousin of disruptive innovation is discontinuous innovation. So again, the notion of these curves is important because it portends what the future will likely hold in terms of sales, market demand, market potential, and so on. So an example of disruptive innovation would be and I'm spent 20 years in the printing industry, so that's one that I'm fairly familiar with. When the printing industry, when we went from Xeroxes where you had big copiers, and that, copiers, Xerox machines were sort of a big thing, and more businesses had them. And then demand started to decline because the market was saturating. Then you had companies like Hewlett-Packard that developed a laser printer. So we would say that we could say that that would be a disruptive innovation where now you don't have to have a big, 1,000-pound copier. You can have a smaller laser printer that is in your office rather than walking to, a copier that's in the middle of the office floor, for example. And so when those disruptive innovations take place, it's important for us as analysts, as leaders, managers, to try to estimate what will the demand be once that disruptive innovation comes online in the marketplace. Now, a discontinuous innovation is an innovation that is markedly different in nature and in scope than, let's say, this continuous and disruptive innovation. So I might think about it in the early to mid 90s when we went from, having CDs where you would store lots of data, for example. But in order for you to share all that data, you would have to take the CD, the disk out of your PC workstation and eject it, and you would have to take it over to another workstation in order to view it at that second workstation. Of course, with the internet, I would say that would be a discontinuous innovation where the need for CDs, once the internet became online and mainstream, the need for CDs precipitously dropped and eventually, pretty much went away. And so again, this notion of innovation is helpful for us to have to factor into what is overall market potential. And as you'll see in the Levitt article here, Exploit the Product Life Cycle, it is simply axiomatic that almost every product will have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it will either be resurrected or it will be destroyed, and there will be a new thing that comes from the old product or service innovation. Okay. This is again sort of an interesting metric. So we're looking at market development and potential. So what we can see here, of course, number one, the curve, the sort of shape here, and I would point you to oh gosh, I'm blanking. Been a long day, I guess. The S curve, Moore's S curve. So that would be one sort of common name for this Moore's S curve. But what's interesting here is that you can see the market development cycle was a lot longer back 70 years ago. Okay. But then as we move forward in time, these sale or the development cycles have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. Again, my own experience in the printer world, in the mid 90s, early mid 90s, we would find that a new laser printer would be developed and released every 2 to 3 years. And then when I got out of that industry, it was about every 6 to 9 months. So the reason is that we as consumers, whether we're businesses or individuals, we sort of get spoiled and we want more and more and more, and we want things better, faster, cheaper. And so as we have developed, at least in the developed world, as more and more countries have become more developed, that you see these development cycles shortening, becoming shorter and shorter and shorter. So here's a metric that we could, here, for example, if we're looking at market development index of personal computers, you would say, what is the current market demand divided by my market potential times 100? So, in this case, 325 divided by 450 times 100 is 72. And so, assuming at the time this was published that 325 and 450 are accurate, then we would say at this moment in time, the market for PCs, however that's defined, and again, a lot of assumptions underneath this, that the saturation level would be 72%. So we could say that there is 28%, or 100 minus 72, 28% of the market which is yet to be developed. Now, there might be reasons for why that is not developed yet, has not been developed. It could be the lack of infrastructure in different pockets and parts of the market in which we're operating. It could be that here, when you get to sort of the flattened part of the growth curve, that there's only so much additional improvement that can be made in a given product or service. So you'll have to bear with me as I continue to sort of toggle back and forth to the printing industry. But when I left that industry, you could buy a laser printer that could print at 60, 70, 80 pages a minute. Now, eventually, your need for faster print speeds is going to go way down relative to the ability of manufacturers and developers to produce faster and faster printers. Okay. And so that's kind of what we might say is indicative of this flattening of the curve, and therefore increased market saturation, because at some point the product or service is performing at a level which is beyond what the market actually needs. And so this notion of flattening of market growth, and eventually, again, in the Levitt product life cycle article, sort of the beginning, middle, and end of a product or a service. The reason why that product or service is quote unquote dying, because there is less and less demand for that product or service, because most of the market has been already developed. Okay. And it's reached sort of a saturation point at which the service or product developer will need to refresh or revamp the product, or maybe the entire industry needs to reinvent itself. Okay. All right. So moving forward, understanding the dynamics of market demand throughout the product life cycle. Okay. So, again, this harkens back to Levitt's Exploit the Product Life Cycle article. We note here that there are, and there's a lot of academic literature and studies that support this, basically 5 categories of consumers: innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. So here, if we think about, for example, when smartphones came online, okay, there will be, in almost every case, when a new product or service comes online, that you will have so-called innovators that want to be, for whatever reason, they want to be the first to own and adopt that product or service or technology. And so I think about, for example, when Apple will release a new version of their smartphone, the iPhone, that you will see people at Best Buy lining up and 3 days before the release. Okay, so that's who these innovators are. Okay, now once the innovator segment has been saturated, then people that would be considered early adopters will see, literally or metaphorically speaking, they'll see the innovators buying the new product and ostensibly liking and enjoying the product or the benefits of that product or service, and they will in turn buy next. And then once the early adopters have bought and seem to be enjoying the new product or service, then there is this next section or category of early majority. Okay, and then so on and so forth, later majority, and then laggard. So what's interesting here is that this late majority is sort of around this inflection point. Okay, so if we think about, for example, this market development index, you can see that if I take the total area of from here, the top of this square to the bottom, we could think about this S curve as sort of the market development index curve. Okay, so that once you're up at around 70–80%, you're at some kind of inflection point here where the majority of the market has indeed been developed, in the demand for that product or service. The demand is growing, but it's growing at a lower and lower rate, right? So you can see the slope is going from, let's say, 1.5 to 1, and then 0.9, 0.8, 0.7, 0.6, and so on. So again, this curve is the beauty of this curve is that it tends to be somewhat accurate and somewhat predictive of what sales will look like going forward in a given market or in a given industry. All right, so the question that we want to sort of ask ourselves is, what are the dynamics of the factors that are shaping these curves of the market growth? And so if we sort of look at the notion of market growth and market opportunity, we could say at an aggregate level, these are, let's say, millions of units. Let's say if it's personal computers, it could be millions of PCs over the years, right? But if we look at that curve and look at it at a much more granular level, the reason why that curve, or let me say it differently, this aggregated curve is made up of all, millions and millions of individuals and small businesses and even large businesses that are making purchase decisions every day and many times within a day. And so when we think about the more granular level of this market growth, what we see is that there are these dynamics around needing, what's your tolerance for risk? Are you able to buy or not buy? Are you able to see other people that bought before you? And are you able to try and buy? Okay. So if we think about these 5 individual customer forces, then what we could say is that anywhere along this curve, each decision-making unit is thinking about and weighing each one of these factors or forces in determining which of these is more important. Okay. So in this example, we would say, well, to the extent that an individual decision maker, most of their decision tipping point is around, I need it. My competitor bought it, whatever it is. And in order for me to compete, I need to have that. Okay. Now, there might be, of course, other considerations around, what is the riskiness associated with buying the product or service? Do I have the budget for it? Do I need hierarchical approval? Do I need approval from my boss and my VP and so on? Can I see other people like me that have bought it and are having good success? And then, yeah, I'm still a little nervous about buying this new thing. So it's important for me, at least it's 1/5 of, or 20% out of 100% important to me that I can try it. And then if I don't like it, then I can return it and get a refund. Okay. So those are sort of the customer forces that are driving this curve. Okay. Now we can look at the product forces. Again, it's interesting. Customers, the unit of measure are customers here and here, but these customer forces here at the top are more internal. How am I thinking about this purchase from a internally facing decision within an organization or a business, as opposed to these product forces where I'm evaluating the product or a service relative to what else is externally out there. So does it provide a competitive advantage? Is it affordable? Is it easy to use? How well does it meet other customers' performance expectations? And is it readily available? Okay. So what's interesting here, again, the unit of analysis is people, but one category of analysis is more internal. And then this next category of analysis is more product centric and not organization centric. Now, I love these 2x2 matrices. Okay. And we could say, for example, here, if we take products and we plot them along, what are the product forces that are driving demand for each of these products, and then what are the customer forces, then you could say, for example, up here, again, this is a little bit dated, so I might, instead of put Facebook, I might, in today's terms, 2023, I might put like Instagram. Okay. And so the idea is there's a lot of advantages. So I'm going to see a higher number here relative to, let's say, Instagram, and the customer forces, hey, I really need it. All of my friends are on Instagram, or my business, its main way of reaching customers is through social media, so on and so forth. Then you would see, for example, you would see Instagram in this very rapid market growth because the product has, or in that case, the app has advantages that people perceive that they very much need. Okay. Now, the inverse can be true here. So, I don't know, flood insurance is a little bit of a weird example. Let's say, for example, here, flat panel TVs. I would say that in today's world, I would probably put flat panel TVs down here in the lower left, because they are pretty darn cheap at this point. You can get them, almost everyone has them, at least I would say in the developed world. And there are lots of different brands out there to choose from. And not as many people need them because the market is more in this market saturation point, right? So therefore, I'd probably put the iPad lower left. I'd probably put the iPhone maybe somewhere in the middle. I might actually put EV cars, not necessarily hybrid cars. I'd probably put EV somewhere in this upper right quadrant. So you can see here, this 2x2 matrix helps us appreciate the dynamics of what are customer needs on the y-axis and what are the product advantages, if you will, on the x-axis. Sticking with the PC market, here is our normal S kind of Moore's law curve. But you can see within that generic products life cycle for PCs that these the speed of microchips has made it where these development cycles are shorter and shorter and shorter. Okay, so if you're a developer, you can't develop an awesome new chip and then kind of chill out for 2 or 3 years. You can't do it. It's too competitive. So when you have a product that is probably 70% of the way through the development cycle, I think you better be working on the next one right away, because if you don't, your competitor is or will be very soon. And if you don't act quickly, you will be out of business. So that's sort of giving you a feel for why, because consumers demand better, what I like to say, better, faster, cheaper, that demand is driving these cycles to be shorter and shorter and shorter. Okay. Now, again, I'll point you to Levitt's life cycle article, and what you'll see, and Levitt, again, theorized this back in the 1960s, is that we have a curve around market demand. This is our typical kind of S curve. But then if we look at marketing profit, we can see that for some period of time here, from 0 all the way to, early growth, we're in the negative, right? So even though we're selling units in this introductory stage, we're still underwater, because we've got to essentially spend a lot of money to get the market aware of the product and the product category, and then try to persuade them that our product or service is better than our closest competitors, right? And only when market demand starts to sort of level off here, right at this inflection point, that's where we see that the net marketing profit, net marketing contribution is maximized here at the inflection point in market demand. All right, so this is sort of the macro view. The I wouldn't say micro view, but a lower level view would be, again, here we can see the average selling price of PCs and printers going down as we go forward in time because of this effect. We've got more and more competitors which are driving down the average selling price. Okay, so if you think about it, right, when there is a new product or a new service, the price tends to be fairly high. We can kind of point back to our microeconomics basics from undergraduate. If you took microeconomics, that at the beginning, the market launch, prices tend to be high for a product or a service. And then as time moves forward, because more and more competitors move into the market space, we'll see the selling price going down and down and down. Okay. So here, this is if that was the uber macro view, this is more of the micro view. So if we're looking at base year market growth of 10%, and we hold that constant, we can see that our average selling price goes down from 500 to 425. Even though our market share stays the same, we can see that our market development index is going up, up, and up. Why? Because we are moving further and further up this curve as we go forward in time. And this undeveloped market is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay. And then even though we see revenues going up, our average selling price is coming down. And even though the number of units are going up, they are growing at a declining rate. So 1.2 to 1.32 is 0.12. And then, so I've got, right. Okay. I'm trying to do math in my head here. So that's 12 here. And then that's 13. And then that's 15. Okay. So trying to do 6, 7, 7, 12. Okay, so I'm at 1.2, 1.3. Yeah. So really the dynamic here, sorry about that. I was kind of just trying to explain this on the fly. The dynamic that we really want to note is that here we see a significant price drop from 500 to 425. So whatever that is, let's see. So that is 75 against 500. So 75 divided by 500. All right. So basically we see a 15% price drop. Whoops, there we go. Basically see a 15% price drop over actually over 3 years. And so that is sort of the micro version of what we see here, because again, even though units are going up, right? So we can see number of units sold is going up, but there are more units being sold at a lower and lower price. Okay. Again, that's sort of this part of our curve here. Okay. So if it hasn't become clear yet, Levitt's product life cycle article remains a seminal thought in marketing, the marketing discipline here. So we can look at this S curve, and it is, I would say, emblematic of this market development index. So again, here on the left-hand side, not much of the market has been developed. In fact, the vast majority at the beginning is undeveloped. But we get to a point here in time, well, let's say here at this inflection point, and we see that again the development index is going up, and up, but at a slower and slower rate because the in absolute terms, the market, undeveloped part of the market is going down and down and down. Okay. This chart is great because it sort of brings all of these ideas together, right? So we've got overall market demand. Okay. That's that curve that we're fairly familiar with. But what we do see is that dollars per unit are going down and cost per unit are going down. Again, we can harken back to our micro econ basics here that says as we go forward in time, the price per unit's going down because we're able to produce ostensibly we're able to produce more and more cheaply per unit. And so when we look at our marketing and sales expenses, they are increasing at an increasing rate until such time as the market demand slope becomes basically is 1, and then it will, as you move forward, be less than 1, like 0.95, 0.9, 0.85, 0.8, and so on and so forth. And at that inflection point, that's where marketing and sales expenses are increasing, but they're increasing at a decreasing rate. Okay. So the beauty of this chart is it's going from macro down, macro industry level down to sort of the firm level of economic price and cost per unit. And again, sort of at the firm level, I would say, where we're seeing marketing and sales expenses continue to go up, but they're going up at a decreasing rate. Now, if we look at a little bit deeper here, and again considering personal computers as our industry, we can see that our average selling price is going down. Okay, that's sort of what we would expect. Here's our, commensurate with average selling price going down, average margins going down. In industry, profit is going up, but our margins are going down because the prices are going down, right? So you can sort of see this either in table format or in chart format, that revenues are growing, but they're growing at a decreasing rate. And here, for example, in 2010, we're seeing gross profit at its highest point in 2010. And I think you would argue, taking this chart and this chart together, that here is where sales revenues are growing, but at a rate of less than 1. And that's why you're seeing this gross profit start to slope down. So now let's transition and understand how market share is achieved, and how do we increase our company's market share relative to competition. Okay. So what we can see here is that there is sort of a factoring of demand. Okay. So those of you, again, that had me for marketing, 241 principles of marketing. We spend quite a bit of time talking about the marketing funnel. And so what we see is that the number of people, customers, potential customers in absolute terms is going to go down and down and down. And simultaneously, our market share performance is going to go up and up and up as more and more customers, prospective customers, were able to be persuaded into buying our product or service. So each stage of the market share performance tree indicates how the customer response to a strategy influences market share. Okay. So we go from less certain that a customer, a prospective customer is going to buy, all the way to, yeah, you know what? They know about our product. It's attractive to them. The price seems okay. They intend. So now this is very interesting. We move into this idea of intention. And then that intention precedes the actual behavior, which is purchase. All right. So this market share index is super important. Okay. This is based on some work by the PIMS profit index market share database. And that sort of evolved into this chart in this thought process called Customer Value Assessment by Bradley Gale. And so the idea is that in a customer's mind, they think about, is the product or service worth what I am willing to pay? Okay. And so if the product or service is below this line, then you would say that it is in a market share gaining position. And this would be a market share, or I'm sorry, I said, no, that's right. This is a market share gaining position and a losing position. So the math underneath this is market share index is the percentage of an audience that is aware that say that the product is indeed attractive, that the price is okay, that they intend to buy, and then they indeed purchase. So again, this is interesting because the math here is fairly straightforward, right? 0.6 times 0.75 times 0.5 times 0.79 times 0.75. So let's, the math nerd in me is tempted to just go ahead and do this. So let's do it. I can, well, I don't know if it's going to let me. 0.6 times 0.75 times 0.5 times 0.79 times 0.75. There we go. So again, this is sort of this factoring down of again, sort of the pool of prospective candidates. We are continuing to whittle them down to a number that is a more likely percentage of people that would end up truly buying from us. So 60 out of 100 are aware of us, but not all of them are necessarily find our product or service attractive. Indeed, of the 60%, 25% say, no, I'm not really interested. And among that smaller pool, only half say, yeah, I'm okay with the price. If the price was lower, I'd probably buy it. But, you know, if I'm in the 50% that I'm not good with the price, then obviously I'm not going to buy it. So you can sort of see how that logic works. So the question becomes, how do I determine what my share potential is? Okay, similar kind of thought process. So I have the percentage of my target audience that is aware, they're attracted to my product or service, they're good with the price, they intend to buy it, and then indeed they do buy it. That here we can sort of see what is our if we have, so here's our 80 80 60 80 80 80 80 60 80 80. You can see where are the gaps between potential and current, and now, okay, now we've got something we can work on. Okay, so if we want to increase our and get closer to achieving our total share potential in this analysis, what we would say is, wow, probably one of the first things I ought to go work on is this performance gap here around awareness. Holy cow, we've got, 80% maximum that could know about our product or service, but less than, well, certainly, well, among the 80%, a little over half actually know about us, right? 45 into 80 is okay. 0.45 divided by 0.8. All right, so 56%, right? So 56% of the total potential of awareness is where I am, but I'm certainly not at 100% of 80%, right? And you can see how if this is how the potential is defined, and now we can examine our current performance, that this performance gap can help us prioritize and do what is often termed marginal analysis. So that one way to potentially interpret this would be, if I had one more dollar to invest in marketing, where would I put it? Without doing a ton of analysis, my initial reaction would be, I would put the additional dollar around getting more and more people aware of the product that I have. Okay. All right. Now what's interesting here is that when we take this market development index, which was well, that was a little while ago, wasn't it? All right, yeah, so here's our market development index. If we take that and combine that with the share index, which is share potential index, again, we have this beautiful 2x2 matrix that says we can plot our products. Let's say if we're General Electric, we could put, light bulbs and refrigerators and aircraft engines and whatever they may be. And you would say, well, if the market development index is fairly low, now I'm talking about the lower left quadrant, and my share index is pretty low, I'm probably wanting to invest more money, everything else being equal, in marketing products A and E more so than A. On the other hand, for product C, I'm probably going to be reducing my investment, right? Because the market's pretty well developed and I've got a pretty good share of the marketplace. And therefore, I'm probably going to want to invest less and less money. So another way to kind of think about that is that those products that are in the upper right quadrant that we were just looking at are somewhere around here, right? So that's not where we're going to want to invest a lot of our additional marketing resources. Okay, so well, this is our last chart. Holy cow. So here is our market performance tool 3.4. So we're combining the concepts of a sales forecast built on market potential. What's our share index? What's our market share index? And what's our share potential index? And then based upon that, we're going to examine so look at this here, right? So if the share index is 10%, or excuse me, market share index is 10%, and the share potential index is 24, then we should see, everything else being equal, we should see that as market demand goes up, that our share index is going to go up, which indeed it does. We can see our share is going up as well, and our revenues are growing. Here, 7 million here, from here to here, from base year to year one, 7, and then I go up 12, and then I go up. It's interesting, right? So I go up like another 12, so I can see that I'm sort of starting to flatten here, right? Because my market share development index is going up, right? So I'm going from 41 to 53 share development index in the market development index. And then I'm just having a bunch of thoughts here. So let's look at this ratio. It's kind of interesting. Market development index goes up 3. Our share development index goes up 4. Okay, so we're developing our market share faster than the overall market is developing. That's +3, +4. This is +2, +4, +3, +4. So we can see that we are outpacing the market. And at some point, and we can see here, it's starting to flatten, right? Up 7, up 12, and now I'm up 12 again. So if we were to go out to years 4, 5, 6, and so on, my prediction would be that we would go up, 12 here, and then maybe 11, then maybe 10, then maybe 8, and so on, because we're going to begin to approximate this sort of curve here. Okay. All right. Woo! That was a lot. I appreciate you guys hanging in there. And I hope you have a blessed day. I'm going to go rest my voice. Probably won't do another recording today, but probably tomorrow. So I will see you soon. Blessings. Bye.